Tonight on CFTK-TV News, Terrace's city workers are getting new schedules. A nearly two-decade-long housing scandal has brought about an apology, and recommendations have resulted from a look into a deadly hostage situation.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cale Maslin, and here's what's making news in the Northwest and beyond. Terrace's City Council is said to have agreed to a proposition where both non-union employees and managers will get new work schedules. The reason for the new schedule is to give those workers an extra day off if they end up working 1 day's hours during an earlier 9-day period. That way, none of those people end up losing out on a day's payment. Due to the time off, and there would not be any additional costs because of the change, according to Terrace's Human Resources Manager, Terry Williamson. Although those days off are not allowed to affect any employee's obligations to their work, and it is believed that someone else will have to cover for anyone who actually takes a day off. It's also been said that seniority will be the deciding factor in whoever gets these days off. Expect to see more people around the Northwest this weekend as two large conferences are just kicking off. In Terrace, Rotary International is coming together for this year's 5040 conference Friday and Saturday. The tagline of the conference is Planting Seeds of Hope in Our Communities. And the Nation to Nation Women's Conference is happening in Prince Rupert this weekend. The two-day gathering brings together a diverse group of members, leaders, and entrepreneurs to inspire and empower women in the Northwest. Vancouver's Little Mountain social housing scandal has dragged on for nearly 2 decades, and for the first time, the developer is apologizing for the stalled project. Penny Davlos has more on the fierce criticism and the excuses.
15 acres of prime land steps from Queen Elizabeth Park have sat mostly empty in one of the biggest real estate scandals the city's ever seen.
A travesty from the beginning.
The long and checkered past.
Everything about Little Mountain has been a disaster.
What's the holdup? What happened?
Michelle Wright was a kid when her family was forced out of their social housing at Little Mountain in 2007.
How heartbreaking it was to watch 700 families get torn apart and displaced.
She watched as the mayor and other dignitaries
We're here to celebrate.
held a groundbreaking for the controversial project. Holborn Group bought the land from the BC Liberal government of the day with an agreement to redevelop the social housing and add market condos in exchange for what many called a lowball price with an interest-free loan.
This kind of deal will never happen again, that's for sure.
Only a few dozen units have been built so far. The incoming 48 units plus childcare and a neighborhood house aren't impressing this retired MLA.
This could have been a model social housing community, a model sustainable community.
Vancouver's mayor tried to downplay the controversy and take credit.
There were no shovels in the ground up until we came into office.
But Little Mountain has been a thorn in the side of a certain housing minister turned premier who's been involved behind the scenes.
The premier last year tried to sit down with Holborn, sit down with the city to encourage them to build this housing faster.
Holborn's CEO made a rare public appearance at the event. Ju Kim Tia is best known as the entrepreneur behind Vancouver's failed Trump Hotel.
Thank you for entrusting me with your family's coveted brand.
Do you feel that the people of Vancouver are owed an apology or some sort of explanation as to why this has taken so long?
Well, that's a tough one. Okay, obviously, yeah, I feel bad about the whole situation. If it makes it any better, yeah, I would apologize for how it's taken so long. It was never the intention.
He committed to an accelerated timeline.
Probably end of 2026.
Another promise with the land's value growing by the day.
People are right to feel skeptical. It's been 17 years. This site has sat empty.
Penny Davlos, CTV News, Vancouver.
Just as wildfires heat up in BC, experts gathered in Prince George this week for an event bringing hundreds of firefighters to train with the BC Wildfire Service. The Fire Smart Wildfire Resiliency and Training Summit involves collaboration with local fire departments and the Wildfire Service setting standards for fire line operations, fire engine developments, and water supply plans, and approaches to building protection. BC said that it has boosted community participation in the Fire Smart BC program by improving accessibility while providing certainty for communities applying for funding. FireSmart is also offering a one-time recovery boost of as much as $100,000 to communities affected by previous fires in addition to wildfire mitigation funding. Coming up next is a report on a violent incident in White Rock. Welcome back. The Burgess Creek wildfire is about 600 kilometers north of Vancouver, remains out of control, and has grown slightly to 1,800 hectares. The BC Wildfire Service says the fire is classified as continuing to spread despite suppression efforts. An evacuation alert also remains in place in the area near the fire, with residents being asked to prepare to leave on short notice. Environment Canada has issued a special air quality advisory for parts of the Caribou region close to the wildfire, including Quesnel, noting smoky conditions in the area are likely to last the next day or so. Over 170 wildfires are burning in BC and neighboring Alberta in an early start to the wildfire season that's prompted fire bans in both provinces. The BC Wildfire Service says a 5-month open fire ban will be imposed on the Kamloops Fire Centre from May 3rd to October 11th. Large open fires or multiple fires on the same property will be banned in the Lillooet, Kamloops, Merritt, Vernon, and Penticton fire zones. Wildfire officials in Alberta say very dry conditions prompted a ban on outdoor fires and fireworks on public lands across the province's forest protection area, although rigged campfires in campgrounds are still allowed. More now on the recent violence in White Rock. We've learned that more about the man who was stabbed Sunday night when he was at a popular pier. He was sitting on a bench just 500 meters from where the attack occurred. His wife spoke to CTV's Abigail Turner.
It's a shockingly similar attack that happened just 3 days ago to Manpreet's husband.
This is the area of my husband's neck where that person stabbed on his neck.
We've agreed to protect their identity. On Sunday, the couple was sitting on a bench at the White Rock Pier when a stranger came up behind them and stabbed her husband in the neck.
We are just shouting and we are screaming, like we are asking people for the help. Please help us. Please call the police.
Her husband thankfully now recovering at home. But with the second stabbing at the exact same location turning fatal, it's a stark reminder her husband's situation could have been much worse.
I was shocked and I was very what the police is doing, what the government is doing. Maybe it's a God's grace that he's alive, he's surviving, he's with me.
A back-to-back gruesome attack shaking up the community.
People are scared and you can see that, and obviously people aren't wanting to go outside, and it can be problematic for a lot of old people.
BC's Solicitor General says he believes Sunday's suspect is the same one as the most recent stabbing on Tuesday. Still, no arrests have been made, a chilling fact for those in the community.
This week's been bad. The last year has been substantially more difficult.
The general manager of Uli's, Jenny Silk, says she's seen a major uptick in criminal behavior, something she believes is connected to a rise in homelessness and addictions.
We're dealing with a different breed. This is not just, some pickpocket kids running around. These are sick people who have nowhere to go.
As Manpreet takes time off school to tend to her husband, she says they only moved to Canada just 2 months ago.
It was like a bad welcome in Canada because we didn't feel safer in Canada anymore.
Abigail Turner, CTV News, White Rock.
After hours of reviewing evidence, the jury in a coroner's inquest looking into a deadly hostage situation in Surrey has come back with recommendations. The inquest heard how Randy Crossan and Nona McEwen were both killed by police during a standoff. CTV's Isabella Zavarisi has the details.
It took 2 days for the jury to reach its verdict, eventually making 7 recommendations. The jury was tasked with making suggestions to prevent deaths in similar circumstances in the future. The recommendations were directed to the RCMP, the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General, and ECOM 911. They include additional training for probation officers in mental health disorders and addictions, conducting coroner's inquests in a timely manner, and having more ERT negotiators to respond to calls. In March 2019, Nona McEwen and Randy Crossan were killed after Crossan took McEwen, his girlfriend, hostage in a Surrey home. The 10-hour standoff ended when RCMP officers fired their weapons. Police fatally shot Crossan and in the process also shot and killed McEwen. BC's police watchdog cleared the officers and concluded that McEwen's death was an accident. The inquest heard from nearly 30 witnesses, including Crossan's parole officer and McEwen's son, who called 911 the evening of the standoff. He said McEwen was a great mother and expressed disappointment that RCMP were found blameless. The recommendations will now be sent to BC's chief coroner and the appropriate agencies. Isabella Zavarisi, CTV News, Burnaby.
Turning to tonight's weather, the north coast should receive only a few clouds plus a low of 6 degrees. The Terrace-Kitimat area will deal with partly cloudy conditions at a low of 6 degrees as well. And the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District should also get a few clouds while their low drops down to -5 degrees. On the north coast, the week for them will see rain at the start, then some sun and a mix of sun and cloud afterwards, with the high bouncing from 8 to 12 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, their next week will be made up of rain to begin too, but mostly a mix of sun and cloud afterwards, while the high moves between 8 and 14 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the next week or so will deal with all cloud and sun mixes, but with some rain too, plus the high shifting between 10 and 15 degrees. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is utility work, bridge maintenance, road sweeping, construction work, road paving, and a pothole repair, plus the Usk Ferry is out of service and the cable car is in effect. Highway 37 has some bridge maintenance and frost heaves, and the Telegraph Creek Road has some muddy sections and frost heaves as well. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, there are concerns over a potential outdoor Canucks playoff watch party. Welcome back. Vancouver's mayor said that he'd love to throw an outdoor viewing party for the playoffs, but he's reluctant, citing public safety. But there are talks underway between the Canucks and BC Place for some sort of outdoor fan celebration. CTV's Martin McMahon takes a look at where things stand.
Remember this? We used to have viewing parties in Vancouver, but now we've been forced to watch people in Winnipeg, Toronto, and Edmonton publicly party, prompting some to ask, why not here?
If we watch the model from other cities, they obviously have a good formula to see how they do it properly, right? So I think if they can replicate that same formula here, I think it would be fine.
They definitely want the watch parties. Obviously, something of a history here.
Yeah, they look fantastic. I think we should do it, but obviously there's a lot of risk.
It's clear the shadow of the 2011 Stanley Cup riot still hangs over this city, with the mayor also treading carefully on the topic.
We had 155,000 people there. And, when you look at the report that John Furlong put together, you could double the number of police officers there. And as the situation unfolded, it wouldn't have made a difference. And so we're being a lot more thoughtful.
But if you're craving an outdoor viewing party, there is hope. The Canucks are in talks about using the area outside BC Place for some type of fan fest.
Well, we see that working really well at BC Place for the BC Lions, and so it's already been established that people know how to have fun right there. It's a great spot.
As for the business community, which has its own scars from 2011, it seems there's support for viewing parties under the right circumstances.
We're definitely open to the idea of making sure we're creating a buzz and creating excitement about these games. And if that is a viewing party, we will support that, ensuring obviously the safety measures in place.
But it seems as if we'll have to wait a bit longer with no outdoor viewing party planned in Vancouver for Game 3 against Nashville. Martin McMahon, CTV News, Vancouver.
It's been a busy period of time on the legal front for Donald Trump, as lawyers for the former U.S. president were at the Supreme Court while his ongoing trial continued in New York. CTV's Joy Malbon reports.
Donald Trump doing a little campaigning in New York before attending his hush money trial. while protesters gathered outside the Supreme Court, where Trump's legal team is arguing the former president has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. Trump faces 4 criminal cases.
A president has to have immunity. If you don't have immunity, you just have a ceremonial president. You won't have immunity.
Absolute immunity, a daring reach for presidential power that lower courts have already rejected. Trump hopes to avoid federal prosecution over January 6th.
We will never give up. We will never concede.
And his efforts to overturn his presidential election loss to Joe Biden. Some of the justices seemed skeptical.
What was up with the pardon? What was up with the pardon for President Nixon? I think if everybody thought that presidents couldn't be prosecuted, then what was that about?
But this is a conservative majority court, 3 of them appointed by Trump, with some judges suggesting that former presidents might have some immunity. Meantime, Trump was in court listening to former tabloid publisher David Pecker describing their catch-and-kill scheme to buy and bury negative stories about candidate Trump. Pecker is a key witness for prosecutors who allege Trump falsified business documents to cover up an alleged affair with Stormy Daniels, to mislead voters and to influence the 2016 election.
Back to the Supreme Court. The justices won't rule for months, and that's a win for Donald Trump. His January 6th criminal trial likely won't go ahead before voters decide if they want him back in the White House. Joy Malbon, CTV News, Washington.
And now we turn our attention to the stock markets. The Canadian dollar is up 11.10 cents. The price of gold is up $4.70. Oil is up 28 cents. Natural gas is down 3 cents. Aluminum is down $40. In Toronto, the TSX is up 83.86 points. The Venture Index is up 8.22. In New York, the Dow Jones is up 156.86. And NASDAQ is up 316.14. Still ahead is some wondering over TikTok's future in Canada. Welcome back. It's one of the world's biggest social media apps, but TikTok has an uncertain future in the U.S. Joe Biden has signed a bill to force the Chinese company that owns TikTok to sell it or risk a ban. CTV's Sarah Plowman looks into if a similar move could happen in Canada.
TikTok's time in the U.S. is ticking as the president signs a bill passed by Congress that forces the app's Chinese-owned parent company to sell or be banned.
TikTok is a major foreign threat.
U.S. lawmakers argue TikTok is a national security risk, claiming China could turn to the app to access users' data or spread propaganda. A position TikTok resists, saying it will fight back in a lawsuit.
Rest assured, we aren't going anywhere. We are confident and we will keep fighting for your rights in the courts. The facts and the Constitution are on our side.
170 million Americans use the app. Some rely on it for their income.
Have you heard of the Syngonium?
TikTok allows me that unique ability to, just go and be myself in front of a large audience and have people support my business because they like who I am and what I'm about.
I don't think that Congress has a real strong grasp on how this app is set up and who owns it, because they continue to say Chinese owners, when in fact 3 of the 5 board members of TikTok are American.
The Prime Minister wouldn't comment directly on the Americans' move.
Canada will continue to look very closely at how we can make sure we're keeping Canadians safe while making sure we're taking advantage of great technologies that spur innovation.
The Trudeau government has ordered a national security review and banned TikTok from government devices, but some experts don't expect Canada to follow the U.S.
I think Canada will sit back, wait, see the massive backlash.
Besides potential legal challenges, it's also unclear who may have the money to buy the app. TikTok still has some time under the law. It can operate in the U.S. for another 9 months as is, and the president could extend that. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Fredericton.
BC Ombudsperson Jay Chalk says vulnerable youth in provincial custody are still being isolated from others in care for long periods, and he's deeply concerned about the lack of progress. The Ministry of Children and Family Development has made on the issue. Chalk says the ministry has not made it a priority to implement recommendations from a report his office released in 2021 about the harms to youth in custody subject to prolonged bouts of isolation. An update to that report stated that the number of youth in custody has dropped since 2021, which should make it easier to implement the reforms to limit the use of solitary confinement. The ministry says it was provided a draft copy of the report, but was unable to give a progress update because the province is facing a lawsuit over the practice. A young killer whale has swam out of a Vancouver Island lagoon on her own after being trapped there for more than a month. A statement from the Ahadasat and New Chatlet First Nations says the animal was witnessed by overnight watchers crossing the lagoon's bottleneck, going under a bridge and down the Espinosa Inlet. The calf had been trapped since March 23rd when her pregnant mother was beached at the same bottleneck and died at low tide. The nations say they will now encourage the animal towards the open ocean, where it's hoped she can reconnect with her family pod. Equifax Canada is testing small batches of rental payment data and says it could establish or enhance the credit scores of about 5 million more Canadians. The federal government recently announced it wants to see rental payment history count towards credit scores because it could help more renters qualify for a mortgage or lower interest rate. Equifax says renters are a growing part of the Canadian economy and should be recognized for making rent payments on time. That's all of our news for now. From everyone at CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin. Thanks for watching.